morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. This is the Consecutive Freedom Games panel. How to counteract populistic counteraction of green transformation. Priscillia Ludosky, an activist for social and environmental rightness, one of the Yellow Jackets movement representatives. Edwin Bendyk, Stefan Batory Foundation Board, journalist, writer, columnist in Polityka weekly, first and foremost. Welcome cordially. Antoni Bielewicz, National Program in the European Climate Foundation, into climate change and collaboration with think tanks and NGOs. Welcome cordially. And we don't have Pamuła with us. She couldn't make it, so she's not present. There'll be four of us talking here. Right, ladies and gentlemen. For a dozen or so years, there's been a surging wave of populism. We thought the situation to be interim, but we need to adjust to the fact that we'll have to live with populists. We are thinking about states where Trump lost the election but still very popular, and he might be running for the next terms of office and he might win next election. We have a very interesting situation, Brazil, with the former president, a socialist, is fighting with a right-wing populist, Jair Bolsonaro. 30th of October will tell you whether democratic or populists win. In Western Europe, we've got problems with populism. France, Germany, Italy. Parties of populists gain more and more votes. The wave is surging, and the humanity is facing the greatest challenge in its history, unavoidable climate crisis. We should speak the same voice. The fight for green transformation should unite us, unite people of different points of view. The situation seems to be reversed. Climate denial, flippant attitude towards temperature increase is one of the points of the agenda of populist parties. Let me read you one tweet. It's Donald Trump's. It's freezing and snowing in New York. We need global warming. So these are these types enunciations from populists. So the first question, why climate denial has become one of the points of the populist parties? Have populists realized that regular people are not interested in fight for green transformation? Or is it populists who told us that there is fight for green transformation, like European Green Deal being an element of Liberal Party's program? Is this a political question or any other? Mr. Bendyk first. Thank you very much. Yes, it's a very important topic. There is no single type populism. The wave seems to be similar, but every country, if we analyze it in our region, if we look at populisms in Central and Eastern Europe, situation turns out to be more complex. Whatever is happening in Hungary, there is no criticism of global warming and the need to combat it. Quite contrary, Orban and his team show that you can reconcile right-wing agenda with climate protection. This is related to the national interest, coupled with the vision of nuclear power supplies development based in Russia. In Poland, we can see a rapid revolution. What our politicians were speaking in 2018 at Katowice Conference of Parties 200 years ahead of us to use the coal. And what is being spoken today? They say it because climate denial and the need for transformation was insufficient to include into the logics of Polish populism that polarizes the society. Polish society, with this respect, regardless whether we think that climate and environmental awareness is high, this is not the element that polarizes Polish society. This brings great hope. Yesterday, we had idea creating debate, right-wing conservatives, Jagiellonian Club and Krytyka Polityczna, and all of us share the same basis. We might differ in details, but not the basis delivered by the science. The problem with populism is as follows. Green transformation and climate transformation is used as one of the motives on a global scale, but the basic source lies in deep structural crisis of capitalism, demonstrated in 2008, with no correction of the system. What is happening past 2008 and post-pandemic fuels populists because solutions can be interpreted as the ones that enhance concentration of capital in oligarchy. It's happening if we can see the results of socio-economic delamination of the society and who gained most on the pandemic and the previous crisis. These are groups of few who were able to privatize the gains and socialize the costs. This is the fuel for populists who speak for the people as they seem, who compete with other parties like socialist parties, which makes it difficult for the socialist parties to operate. In this context, very much depends on local cultural subsoil, climate change factor, and the need to adapt through adaptation is a tool. It is used depending whether it can be used efficiently through research. A very interesting example. I hope Priscilla will tell you more. France is very interesting. Dynamics, political state reconstruction as the result of knowledge about transformation, clumsy activities of the government which trigger the people's fury. And politicians, well, it was social movement that was not animated, and we have politicians that are trying to align with it, to put it on their agenda, and they have a problem. But this is a very interesting dynamics. What Priscilla is going to say is going to be pretty interesting. We'll return to France, but Edwin Bendyk said this is one of the elements of programs. Not necessarily all populists are against green transformation. Is this one of the differentiating factors for populist movements? How do you think? Let me take up the role of speaking after Bendyk, who gives a thorough description of social phenomena, and it's difficult to add anything. I shouldn't be seeing this as the representative of the Climate Policy Shaping Foundation. Energy and climate policy of the European Union is a favorite scapegoat for populists and social opposition, complex, technocratic, very much rooted in untransparent mechanisms. So, decision makers and lawmakers leave the door ajar for populists and for this kind of opposition. The same happens at the national level. We observe Poland and all the acts and regulations which pertain to climate change counteraction strategy and environmental strategies are not transparent. They are the ones that provoke to ask troublesome questions or simplified narratives. A lead or a narrow group decides against society. It's been changing. There's been a huge change in the European Union in 2018, and Yellow Jackets protest and some kind of understanding that social transformations trigger social costs high enough that not all processes can happen behind the closed doors, and the public opinion is introduced into this discourse at specific moments. So, just transformation movement is the right one. What to do with the regions that are highly dependent on energy uh, or energy consuming business sector, energy intensive. Populists or powers that use the climate change and energy transformation as a pragmatic skeleton key to open connection with the public. You take pieces of global warming when there is a snow. Where is the winter? Where has it gone? It's a great mechanism to stir anti emotions. In practice, some of the voices that have been raised by the social opposition groups, well, we need to find a way. What kind of way should we find to take them into consideration in public debate? And what we need to defend against is appropriation of this rebel or doubts of political players who do it in an opportunistic way. We accustomed to looking at France as the changes avant-garde ever since the French Revolution. So my question is, Marine Le Pen's party, is it negative towards green transformation? Right-wing populists in France, do they use this climate denial? Is this a very important point in their political agenda?
Yes, you mentioned a sentence of Trump on Twitter. I have another one for you. He said, I don't care about ecological transition because anyway, we will close the borders. He said that. And what it made me feel is that in France, actually, the right wing probably think that the transition is anti-nationalist, whereas the transition is sharing, is cooperation between people, between group of people, and between countries. So their movement are anti-openness. They have a discourse of us being the nationalists against them being the European Union in the side and the immigrants in the other side. And they keep serving this discourse about borders. And I think that this is more and more difficult for them to reject the struggle for climate change because as individuals in France, more and more people are aware about the emergency to act. For example, I have just some statistic provided by an NGO named More in Common that made a big study called Finding France. And the question is, how can we reunite French people with the environment? And the answer was 68% of French said that they think that fighting together for climate change is a good cause to bring us together. 77% of them said that they need the government act quickly to make it possible for us to have a fair transition. And they say what is important, that they are ready to change their lifestyles. So this is a good signal for the government to act, but this is also a signal that has been kept by the right wing. So they changed the discourse that worried me a lot. They say that, okay, we have to protect ourselves, we have to protect the environment, but when they talk about environment, they are not talking about ecosystems, they are talking about France, about the nationalism. So they say to people, defend yourself with gun, keep people out, and as we know, the effect of climate change is negatively impact some more vulnerable people usually, and they are ready to keep the discourse that says that we have to keep them out. So make it possible to close the border. So it increased this discourse. This increased the impact of the right wing in France because of that, even if it has been rejected by last elections, but it was very close to win this time. So this is really worrying for me to see that they take over the advocacies of climate change movement to use it to keep dividing people in France.
Thank you very much for your intervention. You kind of answered the next question, because, as we all know, we are in for the next wave of populism. There is war in Ukraine, there's energy crisis, we have very high inflation in Poland and in Europe. Most probably, populist parties will gain momentum. So, do we have time to fight populists, or should we learn how to live with them, and we could drag them into the bright side of the power, which might be happening in France? Mr. Bendyk mentioned that there is the kind of change in Hungary. Isn't it worth coercing populists and the leaders, talk them through to be on the side of the green transformation, climate neutrality in the decades to come? Edwin? It's not a question of convincing populists, it's the change of the political agenda of transformists. Draw conclusions from France. There were outbursts, and they were charging yellow jackets, saying that they are anti-transformist. They increased the tax and they didn't take into consideration the social costs and the distribution. So French province would have paid more rather than those from the cities. Cities are subsidized and aeroplanes are subsidized. So it was unjust transformation. So middle class was supposed to bear the cost. They had a representation in the government, and the rest of the society was supposed to bear it. If we change the strategy, if we ask in the spirit of just transformation, we need to spread the costs equally. This must be instrument like left with powers. Mélenchon takes this into the strategy they use, strategy for redistribution, for social rightness, and we use populist weapons. They take them from their hands. If we say that we have to represent our own electorate, we are in the lost position, because this is going to be another polarizing axis. In Poland, you can see by Przemysław Sadura, when we look at the representatives of different milieus, like people's class from a smaller center and mid-class from Warsaw, everybody is for transformation, but there are different perceptions of this. Big city mid-class will do everything but they'll be flying to Spitsbergen. They can do everything to do so if they have enough money. And I understand that this kind of consumption freedom is more costly than incinerating tires in rural areas when we are facing fuel crisis. And they learned that people's class representatives are able to give up many things they've never used, like flying to Spitsbergen. So you need to accommodate different perspectives in political programs. But in Poland, the greatest problem is not populist in green transformation, because they accommodate this necessity because of economy, but the middle class, liberal middle class that is not ready to have freedoms they have gained and the income they'll be able to fly to festivals and so on and so forth. You cannot keep it. We know that. So this is what I would be explaining, how to explain this electorate that if they do not adjust their freedom vision realized by consumption, they'll be feeding populists' attitudes. This will be a serious problem.
We even hear about middle-class hypocrisy who are trying to shift transformation costs to the poorer. Well, the mechanism works like that today. The middle class dominates the public debate and sort of imposes solutions onto the other part of society. Responding to your question, yes, we do need to learn to live with different centers of social objection. I restrict to use the word populism because we've got real centers of opposition and we've got politicians who want to use the term. We need to learn to live with such movements. Populist needs to be checked, followed, catch their lies, and explain to the very essence. I have some simple solutions you may laugh at, but this is the way I see the process. I see it on a national level, first of all, and then I will tell you something, how we think about it in our foundation. On the national level, we obviously need to do something about silencing policy. The policies we make here in the country, in the EU, do not see each other. The energy policy sees no social problems. Social problems are separated from viewed separately, are viewed identically for cities and rural areas, which are totally different. We have to find a way that all the regulations we need to transform our economy and social life, that they take into consideration the social aspect. Secondly, we need to learn to speak more and broader in respect of legislation. Next year we are having a national climate panel about energy poverty and poverty. This is an attempt to approach it from a different perspective. Ask the people how would they solve the problems we are about to face. There are more tools. The citizens panel or energy panel is one thing. There are deliberative methods. There are discussions on the local and central level, or even at companies level. Thirdly, we need to accept that certain solutions are not for all. There will always be justified and difficult to mitigate or neutralize sources of resistance. And that has to be in the discussion and lawmaking process. How we think in the foundation about populism or the backlash, that is the social resistance. Apart from being the national program director, I also coordinate a European program named Backlash. We operate in different countries, but we've got 4 items. First of all, understand the reasons for the backlash by social surveys using organizations that operate in those milieus outside big centers, like, for instance, among farmers. Secondly, establish a dialogue, but not without leaving the position that represent the pro-climate groups. It's not like a salesman traveling with climate ideas. No. That's an attempt to start with real problems that exist in every country. They are differently located in different countries. Thirdly, try to find a solution starting from realistic problems for a society, and they should include the climate and environmental aspect. This is the most difficult part of the plan, because if people start from inefficient management of urban space, then the climate aspect may be contrary to their expectations, but you need to try. And the last item is tracing the process of politicians taking ownership of these protest centers. We want to observe and track how this process of combining populists with the social protests happen. That way, we are trying, perhaps not tame, but live together, build a platform for cooperation with the backlash movements. Antoni Bielewicz mentioned certain tools like a citizens panel. There was one in France, as far as I know, and the government proposals regarding green transitions were rejected by the panelists because they included only the interest of the upper middle class, disregarding the needs of regular people. What was it like in France? Are there any attempts to shift the cost of green transformation to the poorer?
Probably I should answer the first question about if we have to convince the populist. And I think I agree when you said not. I think it's important to understand why people is sensitive to the discourse. And this is linked to understand the status of democracy in France, for example. This is the second year that the country is classified by the economists as a failing democracy. And if we link the social question to this transition, it's important to understand that some of people understand what the right wing said when they say that this is a rich thing, the transition, whereas it's not, because we used to separate the question of environment and social question. And now we keep the Yellow Vest movement make it possible for NGO to work with some different kind of actors and to join the topics so that it can be solved all together and be easier for people to understand that this is linked. Actually, what we did at the beginning of the year 2019 is to ask for more democracy, for more participation of the citizen in the creation of measures, proposal, laws, rules, and that what the government made is it accepted that proposal because we were together. The Yellow Vest movement, the climate movement, researcher, journalists, and any kind of actors that joined together to say we need more democracy, because the fact that you propose some kind of measures such as the fuel taxes, which was the subject of my petition, it wasn't to say that we do not want to finance the transition, but it was to say that this is an unfair measures because it impacts always the most vulnerable people, and you have some sector that's not taxed for that, and the government was saying that this tax was to punish people, drivers, because we are polluting, and they say you need to left the cars. You need to participate to this transition financially talking, but they do not propose alternatives. So this is why people went in the street to say we want to finance, but we do not want to do it if you do not tax big polluters. Just for example, you have the fuel taxes for drivers, but you don't have any tax on kerosene, you don't have any tax on sea fuel, you have a half tax for trucks. So this is just about fair, to be equally considered. And the second question of the petition was the lack of transparency. People wanted they want this transition, they want to contribute, but they want to know what you do with the money. And we knew at the end of the year 2018 that the money was distributed to big enterprises. And they should hire, but they fired. So all these kind of issues make difficult for people to trust the government. And the right wing say this is us against elite. The elite is the government, but they do not trust anymore the government. So it works. The discourse works. So what we can do, I think, is understand that we have to bring advocacies together, different sectors, and ask for participation, such as these tools that are the citizen assemblies, for example.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much for your opinion. You said we need more democracy, more participation. That seems pretty natural. However, there are opinions, and I will have a provocative question to everybody. There are votes that democracy facing the inevitable crisis is ineffective or hardly effective. So, if we need to counteract, we need to act quickly. The crisis is rushing in. So perhaps there is no time for deliberation, negotiations with the society. Perhaps a enlightened authoritarian rule would be more effective, that will impose changes and save humanity. I know it's a provocative question, but it is emerging. Well, that model is consolidating. In China, there is the Communist Party Assembly. Xi Jinping would be nominated lifetime president of Communist Party. And China is still not the best example. We could hear that they are an example of a specific enlightened totalitarianism, like during the pandemic. But it turns out it's not the way it is. It's not the best place to look for answers or attempts to answer that is Ukraine, where in the worst possible conditions, when Ukrainians asked what was the source of the success that Ukraine is still defending and winning, obviously with the support of the other part of the democratic world, since 2014, they were based on deep democratic reforms by decentralizing the authority, including local communities, and that made Ukraine resilient. Now, during the war, they say democracy is the best management system even during the war. This is information that proves that in a crisis, when there is no single question to what is happening, the replies needs to be shaped locally. Otherwise, consequences of the climate change will be different in the Kłodzko Valley and different in the Podlasie region. And you cannot have one solution fits all. It needs to be worked out locally. And enhancing democracy, giving opportunities, looking for replies locally, with, of course, with coordination from the region, state, Europe, is the only true answer. Is it slower? No, it won't be slower, because an autocrat can make a decision faster, but the consequences will remain with society for ages, because this decision won't be optimum, and that is the issue. Obviously, there is another problem, that is justified alarmism among activists. They claim it's very late. There is no time to run the transformations per the scientific objectives adopted in Paris 2015. 1.5 degrees Celsius of temperature growth as a limit is unreal, frankly speaking. If we want to, we would need to act instantly. So there are voices to go take a shortcut that allows some right-wing milieus, which, hearing those alarms calling for faster political activism, they act as defenses of common sense. All of a sudden, the right-wing extremists say, don't get crazy, those maniacs would like to destroy our walks of life. We know it has to be done, but you need to keep your common sense, because the cost would be too high to bear. And it was well presented in a counterpoint think tank research that shows that the green wedge action can be surprising. It may generate support for populism, not directly, but in response to the claims of those who care for the environment. Concluding, there is no better reply than enhancing democracy and social participation. There is one basic reason for that. Today we have different society than 150 years ago. That's the issue of the volume of knowledge we have, the average education, that social organizations, that's a capital of knowledge, as it turned out with the order crisis. When did the government start acting? When did social organizations, when they started to look for answers on their own? There is no other solution that combine resources of different actors acting socially, and then we will be able to reach an optimum in terms of a proper solution. I may be short of imagination, but I can't invent any other system that would be more effective in solving such complex problems other than democracy. So this provocation stimulated me, but didn't make me think. I would also note one more aspect related that only the democratic system can make us ready for the reaction to the effects of climate change. We will not live till the world where the temperature rises less than 1.5 degrees Celsius to the end of the century. There will be different natural disasters, and attempts to respond to such disasters is more effective in democracy rather than in totalitarianism. We will have time for deliberation, for persuading the society. Is there still time for that?
I think it's, first of all, we have a lot of advocacies that already have showed that some deliberation devices works, and that this is necessary to construct. Because when you act in an emergency context, I think you probably will pay it after. So yes, there is an emergency, of course, but this is not a blank page. We have some works done by a lot of NGO and activists since years. Obviously, we have to update them to the context, and we have a lot of people who are ready to do so and who propose their experience to the government and to any people who wants to see them. What is important is, for example, in France, this was the first time through this Yellow Jacket movement that you had a grassroots movement going in the street asking for democracy. Usually you go out for more salary, you go out for any kind of subject linked to your purchasing power, I would say. This time people was in the street to say we want to participate. This is not usual for a government to hear that in France. And some institute made a study about that, saying that 57% of French people want to challenge the way they take decision in France, and to include some citizen assembly, include the citizen initiative referendum. And the president answered that this is a danger for the representative democracy, instead of hear that this is a new way of taking decision and to work with the population. So I think it's important in the first side to listen these needs, to take into consideration the works of NGO and experts, and to accept that we are in the transition. The transition is not only about ecology, it's also about democracy. And I think we cannot disconnect this both sides.
Ja celowo zadałem
I asked this provocative question because I wanted to speak about the French example and whatever happened in France in 2018, how the society was not asked about their opinion. There were riots that continued for long. We observed it all over the world. There were press coverages from France showing the society protesting in the streets. There were fatalities. So my question is, in relation to Yellow Jacket movement, can they be treated as a warning, not only for France, Europe? What may happen if the society is not engaged in discussions about changes towards green transformation? Okay, me. The French lesson is very interesting. Remember, it was a very interesting context. The protest started when a Katowice climate summit started. Therefore, French Prime Minister did not come. The president did not come. They had to deal with home business. Looking at the process and protest, how it was organized, it was social innovation, a revolution. Very interesting. The attempt of other organizations to cope with it, because back then there are different actions. Lawyers' action, who sued the French state for inaction, and they harvested million signatures in order to sue the French state, like similar in the Netherlands. Then Emmanuel Macron wanted to delegitimize the Yellow Jackets, started a national debate on climate, a huge event. 10,000 communes saw discussions, great endeavor, but it didn't weaken the message of Yellow Jackets. Civic panel, another part of the process, initiated by the president, Emmanuel Macron. Mixed feelings and mixed results, because the political sphere was not ready to accept the decisions, so huge disillusionment in what was happening. It shows that, as Priscilla said, French democracy is believed to be a declining or failing democracy. And on the other hand, you can see how complex and strong it is. It is able to start different negotiation mechanisms to look for national level solutions, which is even more important. Much is happening at the local level. French cities are laboratories of specific type. When the Green parties took the steering role over, many cities are governed by Green parties, and there is interesting prospering for solutions. It's a warning and a great chance how to open political process for innovations. The recent elections had very nice dynamics. Before the first round of presidential elections in France, that climate topic kind of escaped. Cost of livings and purchasing power were mainly tested, and this organized discussion, and it was a fuel for Marine Le Pen. But the climate topic was overshadowed, yet not eliminated, which was indicated in the second round. And Jacques-Luc Mélenchon, by the skin of the teeth difference with Marine Le Pen, and he had climate agenda. He gained young people on that. And Macron changed it in the second round, speaking about ecological planning and similar. Democracy, even if it's weakening, is the only instrument to absorb these kind of very important warnings as Yellow Jackets. and to moderate it in the language of politics, of translating into political agenda and moving the things forward. It's happening. Yellow Jacket movement. Priscilla, you were one of the founders of this movement. Everybody is saying that the main reason was there were taxes imposed when it comes to fuels, but I think it was a deeper problem. So would you please tell us what can we learn from France, from the Yellow Jacket movement? What kind of conclusions can we draw for what was happening in France back then?
First of all, the full topic of this movement was first the deep transformation of institution. In the way that they work, actually, there is a deep need to change it. As we said, to include participation, but also to consider a context, even very locally, to make measures and to imply some mayors in this that has been rejected from the president first. They feel alone because they are not included in political constructions. And now it's difficult for any politics to reject the social question from programs. This is really important. It's not a politic movement constructed like that. It's still a movement, grassroots, but it has a big print now in France on climate topic, on democracy topic, and on purchasing power topic. And what is very good to see now is that you have different kind of struggle who now work together, finally. I always fight to have more, not a closed struggle, but to open to others, because you have some, how I would say that, you have like a wall, institutional wall, to make it possible for advocacies to succeed. And the fact that you have the struggle against violence to women, the struggle for more purchasing power, I would say, the NGO fighting for against climate change, the Yellow Vest movement, all now are working together. This wasn't possible years ago, and now the fact that they do so, we have more results. The problem is another problem. The problem is the fact that the government doesn't take into consideration this union. Why I'm saying that? The example of the Citizen Assembly for Climate is a good example. You have this kind of union, which was called the Citizen Vest, Citizen Jackets. It was the collective. We asked for the creation of a citizen assembly over 3 topics: democracy, taxation, and climate, in January. The president answered yes in April. In 4 months, he said yes to something we were asking for years. This is why I'm talking about being joined. This is the first thing. And the second thing is that you had 150 people chosen by lot who worked over proposal. Their mission was to reflect on proposal to reduce emissions with a spirit of social justice. This is the new thing we brought in that. And they did. They provide, first of all, people was laughing at them, specifically ministers, deputies. They were laughing at them. Those people were very affected by that. But after that, they worked with lawyers, they worked with NGO, they made a very good quality work, actually. So it shows that when you give people information, tools, some space to deliberate. Actually, we were talking about deliberation and the fact that this is important for people to talk together, to understand why you not agree with me, why you do not think it's possible or not. They talk. We have a space for that. They worked for 9 months, and they provided 149 measures. So after that, those people said this has changed our lives because we are now able to talk together about something we are not agree with. We are able to express this with family, friends, colleagues, and we're now aware of this is really urgent to act. But the problem of this kind of devices is the effective implementation, because you have a wall of the institution. Over these 149 measures, 10% of them have been selected by the government to become a law after that. This is really not a lot, whereas those persons provide good quality work confirmed by experts in 9 months. So this is what we cannot talk about a succeed, but it is good signal for the future. The problem is that do the government will accept this new way of construction of laws? I don't think so.
Dziękuję bardzo. Proszę Państwa,
Thank you very much indeed. We've got less than 9 minutes before the end of the panel. If you want to ask questions, this is the time. Yes. Valentin needs to bring your microphone. Morgan Janowicz, Greenref Institute. We are Future for Food for Climate Institution initiator. Greenref Institute, we have carried out a project on green ambitions during war in Ukraine and economic crisis. And as part of the project, we carried out 2 experts panels that brought green media experts and NGOs. It was clear at the analysis that we carried out, war in Ukraine is a kind of pretext for decision makers, male and female politicians, to delay green transformation or discard some measures contained in green transformation. So the question to you, what can we do, activists, experts, in order to protect the ambitions of the European Green Deal against regression? We are answering the question straight away. What you need to do, well, one method Priscilla was speaking about, to develop a broad scope coalition of different people, not only experts, but also those who are outside a scope, who deal with democracy in a broader context. So you can build a coalition together in order to communicate unjustified arguments of the authority that refer to the war and urgency of the war, showing that not necessarily is this the case. You can reconcile war ecology, as they call it, that acting in this domain is the right answer. It's strategic answer. So the only answer to the war that brought specific threats lies in transformation, because diversification, changing Russia for other suppliers does not solve the problem in a long perspective. So this is the only moment. And working on a democratic procedure for the next governments to be more aware, more informed. But we have the composition of the government as it is, so they should be supplied the knowledge. This is what we can do as organizations. I think there are 2 other questions. Let's use this opportunity. Let's establish a dialogue. So this is a true dialogue. Good afternoon. Liberty Talks, AI podcast owner. Thank you very much for this very interesting discussion. And my first question pertains to the previous question. How much do you believe that it is feasible when we speak about populist surge in the debate on climate change and in the debate of war in Ukraine? Do you think European Union can step back from Fit for 55? Do you think it is real? And Antoni, Edwin was speaking about thing. It pertains to my second question. By the end of the century, we are unable to stop the temperature rise above 1.5 degrees. Why do you think it is impossible? Because we've got examples that we've been able to stop the changes related to gas emissions, like Montreal Protocol and ozone hole. So we stop this destruction through business changes, and we don't produce freon. And we have lots of substances on the ban list. Fit for 55 is in danger, and this attitude of impossible, although we've got examples of acting together. Let me answer the first question, and Edwin will speak about things impossible. It is not impossible, impossibilism. The shape of regulation shows that the European Union answer to war is acceleration of the green transformation. This is Repower EU package that gives you crazily ambitious objectives in energy efficiency, discontinuation of the use of fossil fuels. So I cannot see any threat. This is a political process. EU parliament elections are in less than 2 years, so we can think what's next. Briefly, it's for a longish discussion. Egypt and upcoming COP. Let's see what happens in Egypt. It's not technical capabilities. We have technical capabilities, but when we look what the visions of climate neutrality built upon in 2050, still on technologies that do not act. This is not 100% emission reduction. 50% of emissions are attached to fossil fuels, and then carbon capture and storage methods will be used for that. This technology does not exist yet. It's still in the cradle. We don't know whether it's going to exist. We cannot say that it is impossible. This is one of the prerequisites. And the other one is truly political, therefore COP is very important. Global North. Will we share the transformation costs in a right way? We don't have loss and damages mechanism. We are not able to pay 100 billion euros that the South needs, which does not participate in climate change to such extent. If we don't do that, well, you cannot cheat thermodynamics, and it's obvious. One more question. We've got 2 minutes left. In the back of the room, there is a lady. Over there. And I can see the voice here. I don't know whether we can. Dorota Stępniak, Content Story Foundation. New scenarios for democracy change. More often than not, do we speak about it? We can change the age limit. We can allocate voices with blockchains, votes with blockchains. The voices are stronger. So 2 short questions in relation to this. Can you see the possibility? So what is the time perspective of introducing such changes? And how can it be possible to introduce the changes in Poland? Priscilla, how about you?
Yeah, maybe I would answer for all I heard before. When I listen to the question, what we can do as activists, I agree with the fact that this is not only activists, but all the profile we talk about. And I think that among those democratic tools I was talking about before, I think this is a crucial point to act, because we did everything we could do. Demonstrate this civil disobedience, advocacies, justice action, and some of NGO just combine all that. And I think that we maybe forget that we have a contract altogether with some governments, which is a constitution. And the Citizen Assembly for Climate asked to add in the first paragraph the protection of environment that's been rejected. And I think this is important for us to fight for that, so that this contract include social aspect, environmental aspect, very stronger, deeper, with a link to the fact that if you do not respect that, you have to go, you have to leave as a president, because there is an emergency. So there is no contract between us and the government. This is what I think is missing, so that they can, do what they have to do, considering what the IPCC said. the expert. I don't know if this is English IPCC, is that? Yeah, thank you. And when you talk about blockchain and the way we vote and the way we use some tools, it's important. It's interesting because, for example, what we asked with some activists was to change the way we vote. For example, instead of saying yes or no to a candidates, we were asking to propose an evaluation, a mention to say good, not very good, average, and so on. That shows the really opinion of people. And you have an average then who gives the candidate, which is the winner. And some small tool like that probably will make it more easy for people who are elected to do what they have to do, considering the contract. And we were fighting also for the possibility that they could be revoked. Revoked is to be fired. I don't know if it's a good word to say. And because I think that when they provided some measure that benefit to big enterprises, such as Total, for example, nobody can act on that. There's no sanction. You see, for example, when I was talking about my petition, who said you want us to pay more because you want us to stop using oil, but in the same time, you authorize Total to take oil from one of the overseas department of France, which is Guyane. So there is no logic. So how you sanctions that? This is what I'm questioning. And I think if we have like a big union from all that sectors, all that profile, asking for the respect of the contract, this is maybe a first step. I don't know if it's answering the question.
Dziękujemy bardzo.
Thank you very much. We ran out of time. Thank you very much for taking part in this panel.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it and how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Ihre Ausreise
Network is, as the name suggests, a network, and it's global. We work all around the world. We're based in the US. We have about 159 partners in the United States right now, and the bulk of our partners are outside, nearly 500 in total.
Atlas Network, it connects people from all over the world, defending the idea of human dignity, defending human rights and personal liberties.
Atlas Network is focusing on, I think, the most important and moral cause in the entire world.
We partner with local innovators, local leaders who understand conditions on the ground in communities facing real challenges. We look at the people from the worldwide freedom movement that are passionate, are ready to make a difference, understand local conditions, and we invest in them.
At Atlas Network, we unleash individual ingenuity to enrich humanity.
The United States does not have a lock on the idea of freedom and liberty. Those ideas are beyond borders.
One of the main goals of Atlas Network is to eradicate poverty around the world, and we do that by investing millions of dollars in our partners' work every year.
Historically, wealthy nations around the world have tried to help low-income countries develop. The way we've been doing it traditionally has not really been working. So there's a movement to do development differently, and that means we need to step back as outsiders and rethink the role that we're playing in helping people in low-income countries achieve their dreams.
We want to make the world a better place. We want to make the world a freer world.
All of us want to leave a legacy and be part of something big to make a better world. This is exactly the work of Atlas Network.
With our growing number of hundreds of successful partners, we're stronger than ever.
Changing the world.
Changing the world.
Changing the world
starts together
with us.